Hi, this is your host, Alan Ballier, and our guest tonight is Glenn Atkinson, who's back for episode number 3 of his wonderful lecture on how Rudolf Steiner's medical lectures informed his agricultural lectures. And I guess with that intro, Glenn, you want to start?
Yep, thanks. Hello, Alan. Great to be here again, and thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure.
Um, yeah, thanks. Now, where we've got to in this is this is the last session, and what I'd like to look at is the way the sixth lecture and the eighth lecture of the agriculture course is enlightened by what we find in the medical lectures. Now, the main pictures that I'll be using this time, from the PDF that's associated with this talk series, is number 21, number 16, and number 17. They'll be the sort of main pictures that I'll be sort of referring to. Now, just as a bit of a quick recap, the basic biodynamic point of view when we read it in most journals or articles or whatever is really presented as a polarity of two processes. One that is coming from above and we can see as a sort of contractive influence, and one coming from below that we can see as a expansive influence. Now, what happens in the medical lectures is that basic polarity is extended further, and it starts by the above contractive process working into the below, and we can see this in this picture number 17, that the contractive process works into below and sets itself up in a sort of working harmony with the expansive process that is already there. And so, in a sense, this allows for a fourfold game to be taking place now, that not only do we just have this primary contraction and expansion, but we now have, in our head, where there is a natural contractive process, we also have an expansive process there now. And so this is what we see in these pictures in Lecture 8, where there's a picture of the animal that Steiner is trying to give this image of, and we can see that in the head region we have these two activities called cosmic forces and earthly substance, and then in the belly activity we have this cosmic substance and earthly forces. Now, this is still only part of the story, because in the medical lectures, Steiner goes on and talks about how we have the four primary activities coming from the galaxy, solar system, atmosphere, and the Earth. Those four above activities are working in all of those three systems that we have: the head system, the chest system, the stomach system. That the four activities are working there. Now, of course, the spirit and the astral coming from the galaxy and the solar system, these are contractive. So they're on the contractive side of the game. And the atmosphere and physical processes, which we call physical and etheric, they're coming from the below. So they're part of the expansive game. And so where we're talking about a belly expansive process working up into the head, and we call that earthly substance as a name, what we're talking about is a physical and an etheric process being described in that one term. And this is similar with the cosmic forces in the head. That's dominated by the galaxy star activity. And but there is a secondary process sitting in behind it, and that's this planetary astral activity. So basically what we need to do is see that his real story in the medical lectures has got 4 activities in the head, 4 activities in the chest, and 4 activities taking place in the belly. So instead of a twofold game that we get with biodynamics, the medical lectures are actually a 12-fold story. And so it allows for a far greater sort of complexity and sophistication in an understanding of what's working in any given situation. And so with regards to the agriculture lectures, he really only takes us to that second stage where we've got 4 processes taking place instead of 2, which is good. It sort of keeps things simple, but it is quite important for us to realise that those 4 things he's talking about can be enlarged if need be. So this is the context, I think, that we're given in the agriculture lectures, that we've got in the head we've got 2 processes, one expansive and one contractive, and in the belly we've got one expansive and one contractive. And from the earlier talks that I've given here, especially the first one, when I was talking about the second lecture, there's a whole this story of these 4 parts is told in that second lecture, but in regards to the physical carriers of clay and sand and humus and cations. It's really right from the beginning of the course. He outlines how these 4 activities are going on, and generally they're simplified, that whenever anybody sees something that says earthly something, they just think of that one expansive polarity. And whenever they see the word cosmic, they just think of the one contractive. However, that's not, well, I don't believe that that's the right way of looking at things, because when you do read through the course, he will be talking about cosmic substance and cosmic forces all the way through. And we don't really get this clarified until the 8th lecture. And that's a bit of a shame because, as I say, once we see this 4 activities taking place, then it's all the way through the course. And the 6th lecture in particular is really quite important to have these 4 processes for us to understand what he's talking about, because in the 6th lecture we get a lot of different practical indications that we can use. And, you know, early on he gives us this little bit of a conversation about how the planets are working. And he talks about how the planets come in and are reflected back from the Earth. And the interesting thing is that it's opposite to what he says in the 2nd lecture. And so in the 2nd lecture, he's telling us that the cosmic planets, the outer planets, are working from the Earth outwards, and the inner planets are working from above downwards. And then in the 6th lecture, he basically says exactly the opposite, that the inner planets are working, raying back so that it works from below upwards. And then the outer planets are working from above downwards. Now, this causes quite a bit of confusion for people often, and at this point people sort of go, well, he must have got that wrong, he was just mistaken. But of course the planetary influences, like the calcium and silica processes, are circular. Of course, they're coming from the planets, and they come into the Earth, and then that is reflected back out from the Earth, back out to the planets. So we have an inward moving process for the inner planets, and an outer moving process for the inner planets, and we have an inward moving process for the outer planets and an outward moving process for these outer planets. So they're two circles. We have to see these activities as two circles. And when we do that, we've got 4 levers to our plant growth, not 2. So it's not a simple game of expansion and contraction, as normal biodynamics would have us believe, but there is expansion and contraction coming from the earth, and expansion and contraction coming from above the plant in that flowering zone. And what this says is that I should say, we start to see this very clearly when we come to Steiner talking about fungus. Because, again, there's things in that conversation that don't make a lot of sense. And one of the things is that, through the course, he talks about how the calcium processes have to do with nutrition and an expansive vitality-related nutrition, reproductive force, and so it's a growth force, whereas the cosmic influence coming from above helps to sharpen up the nutrition and the quality of the food. When we have a nice, hot, dry summer, we get much more flavoursome and nutritious food, that light quality. So he also talks, though, that coming from below is this cosmic activity. I guess I need to just say we have to refer back to the second lecture here. And in that second lecture, he talks about how in the autumn, all the light and the warmth is drawn into the earth by the silica processes and the sand in our soil, and it's consolidated in the midwinter point. And then with clay, that silica process then comes up in the spring, and this is the plant bolting off to seed, is that it comes up and bolts all the way off and pushes through to become the seed. And so that silica process that's coming from below is what carries the calcium up into the plant. Now, Now, that silica process and that calcium process that's coming out of the ground in the springtime, that has to be met from those activities that are coming in the belly. So not only do we need the light and the warmth to make the plants flower and to make the pollen fertile, but we also need that humus activity that we have in the soil that Steiner says sucks all of that atmospheric life processes that are living in our atmosphere. He says that the humus sucks that into the earth and holds it closer to the earth. And so this etheric activity that's in the atmosphere is what makes things big. It actually enlarges the fruit, enlarges the leaves, and this gives us the fleshy part of our fruit. So we have these sort of 4 processes taking place that if we, look into the fruit, we can see that the upward moving silica process is pushing all the way into the seed and giving us this quality of reproduction within the seed. The calcium processes coming from below are providing all the cations like calcium, magnesium, potassium, that is giving us the quality of the tissues So the physical quality of the fruit is coming out of those cations from below. And this is being met by the moisture in the air and the activity of the atmosphere that is allowing for the fertilized fruit to develop and to size. But we need the light and the warmth coming from the atmosphere above to ripen that fruit and to bring the nutritive quality into the fruit. And it also shows in the quality of the skin at this point. And so it's these four forces that need to be working all together for us to get a really tasty big piece of fruit that's going to keep well. So that's the sort of image that I, get from the second lecture. And we come to the sixth lecture when Steiner is talking about fungus. And he gives this image, and this is where I go to the picture number 21 in that PDF. We get this image of the wet winter followed by a wet spring. And then the full moon comes along, and it's got all of this moisture out of the earth that it's drawing up into the atmosphere, and this allows those soil fungi that are happy in the soil to come up into the leaf realm, and that this provides this artificial soil for the fungus to then attack the plant. And that's an okay image, except he makes these comments about there being too much vitality. And the actual quote is, when the vitality is too strong, it doesn't reach all the way to the top. So I'll just start this little bit. Let us assume, however, that the moon's influence is too strong, that the soil is overly enlivened. In this case, the vitality works up too strongly from below, and something that should occur in the seed formation starts to happen earlier. When the vitality is too strong, it doesn't reach all the way to the top. Its very intensity makes it start working lower down. Thus, because of the effect of the moon, there's insufficient force for seed formation. The seed incorporates a kind of dying life into itself, and through this dying life, a kind of second ground level is formed above the level of soil. Although there's no actual soil up there, the same influences are present. As a result, the seed or the upper part of the plant becomes a kind of soil for other organisms. Parasites of all kinds of fungi appear. What wants to work upwards out of the soil is kept from reaching the right height because of the overly strong lunar force. It's remarkable that this would happen when the lunar forces are too strong rather than weak, but that is the way it is. The healthy seed-forming capacity is absolutely dependent on the lunar forces being normal rather than too strong. So that's the image that he gives. And I think it's sort of quite conflicting and confusing in that we've got this idea that vitality is, especially in organic agriculture, vitality is the answer to everything. If we just feed things really, really well, then they'll be healthy. But of course, they often overblow things and make them too big, too watery, too much nitrogen. And because they don't have 501, they don't have the silica preparation, they can't put a cap on the upward moving vitality, and so they get prone to various fungal problems and pests and chewing pests and things like that. So there's this confusion here, is what we think makes a plant healthy is all of a sudden too much. And where he's saying something that should occur in the seed formation happens earlier. And he's what wants to work upwards out of the soil is kept from reaching the right height because of the overly strong lunar force. Now, when we put this within this context of these 4 activities rather than 2, we've got these 2 activities coming from below. And the one that we associate with the earthly moon processes and 500 is coming, and Steiner calls this the earthly substance. So this earthly substance force is the one that Steiner's saying is too strong. It's too much. And then he says something that should occur in the seed formation can't happen. And so this is something. What is the something? And what works upwards out of the soil is kept from reaching its right height. So this upward moving force that comes out of the soil that we see in the biennial plant, where we know that the first year they just make a rosette, and then something happens to that plant so that it pushes up into the sky. And so this is that cosmic forces part of the story, working with the clay, pushing up out of the ground. Now, the way I'm reading this 6th lecture is that's what's suppressed by this overly strong lunar vitality force that's coming. And so if we think of a male and female or a husband and a wife team, and they're walking along the road and they're all sort of happy. But if the wife is too strong and too dominant, then the man has to sort of pull back into himself, and he can't really fulfill his role in the relationship, really. And so this is where we can see that it's actually this cosmic force clay activity that is lacking in the story that Stein is telling us in the 6th lecture. And of course, that then suggests that if we use more clay in this situation, we will strengthen that male force and help to overcome the female activity that is dominant. And so that adds to our story. Now, of course, Steiner goes on after this and just talks about equisetum, and he just says, now, so what should we do? We need to relieve the soil of the extra lunar force. We need to find a way of reducing the water's mediating activity and giving the soil more earthiness so that the water that is present does not absorb the excessive lunar influence. We accomplish this through outwardly giving, though everything remains the same, by making a fairly concentrated tea of equisetum, which we then dilute as a liquid manure over the fields that we want to combat the diseases. Small amounts, even a homeopathic amount, will do. And it says, when you understand the remarkable effects of equisetum on the human organism via the kidney function, you'll have a guideline to how this is working. And he says that the equisetum actually provides an activity that is opposite to the process that he described earlier. And so we've got this sort of outward moving water vitality activity, and he's saying the equisetum will provide something that is opposite to this. And of course we need to look into my equisetum and fungus article where I look into all of this, and what we see up there is again a slightly more complex picture than what we might imagine, in that we would be seeing, equisetum being a silica plant, we would think it works a bit like 501, and that it would be stimulating that contractive process from above and, in a sense, pushing back the over vitality of that calcium process. And to some degree, that is what happens, and it may be that simple. But when we look into the medical lectures, it's a bit more of a complex story, and there's a sort of equisetum, while it acts in that metabolic above the ground area, it seems to work more as a harmonizing force of the above, so the that process of humus and mass activity that we talked about before. The medical lectures say that the equisetum actually works to harmonize the relationship of the light and the water above the plant, and that out of that harmonization that we then get a pushing back from above, as it were. So it's a little more complex, but at this stage it's easy enough just to see the equisetum as pushing from above. Now, I'd like to just bring a reference back to the lecture 5, which is where Steiner talks about all of the compost preparations. And in there, he talks about the oak bark preparation. And he's talking about how this is bringing calcium process. And he's saying that the oak bark preparation creates order when the etheric body is working too strongly, so that the astrality can't influence the organic entity. Calcium in any form will kill off or dampen the etheric body and thereby free up the influence of the astral body to work against this etheric development. And so in the 5th lecture already, he's given a remedy that will provide the forces to prevent or arrest harmful plant diseases. And so in the oak bark preparation, which of course has been put into a skull, into a head, and left in water through the winter time, is having this ability to get this rampant etheric and vitality process that Steiner mentions in the 6th lecture, and has the ability to pull that back into the earth. And so what we're given here then is that not only do we have equisetum as a solution for fungal problems, but we have oak bark that can pull that overly vitality activity from below and pull that into the earth. We've got the equisetum that is working to, in a sense, push it back into the earth. But I think most importantly, we have the clay that will push up the silica process that's being overly dominated by this excess water that's being described. And so by looking at, from the medical point of view, really appreciating the fourfold game rather than a twofold game, we can find more solutions to the problem. And I've got to say that the fungal product that I make based on this, with these 3 ingredients, works very well against most powdery mildew, even brown rot on peaches, black spot on apples. It's a really good, a good solution. Now, while we're talking about fungus, there's something that the medical lectures provide, and something I talk about in my essay on fungus and equisetum, is in the medical lectures. Steiner gives this other image of fungal problems as coming from overly strong heat process from above. And of course, this is what we experience in the summertime with powdery mildews and I think various rusts and so on that start to attack once the heat comes on. And for this, he suggested cinnabar as the solution, which is mercury sulfate. And from my chemistry, we can see that mercury sulfate is actually stimulating the way that the internal etheric body works into the physical. And so this is coming from below, as a force coming from below. And so in a sense, it stimulates this earthly substance process that in the 6th lecture we're trying to hold back. But when we come to these dry summer fungus, we actually want to stimulate this earthly substance process. And the medical lectures suggest that cinnabar would be a very good stimulation. Now, we can go a little bit further, and in the medical lectures, Steiner talks about this Bidor remedy. And Bidor is an artificial equisetum, but it's actually opposite in its action to equisetum. The product Bidor is made from quartz crystals that is ground up, just like 501, and then he puts it with iron sulfate, which is porites, and he grinds all that up, puts it all together and cooks it in an oven. And then he grinds it all up again, and then they dilute it to like 1%, and you take it as a powder. And this actually stimulates the head forces, whereas equisetum stimulates the belly forces. This stimulates the head forces and pushes back those belly forces. So again, that overly active light and warmth that's coming through the summertime is working in too strongly. Well, it would suggest that this Bidor remedy could be used along with cinnabar to push off these powdery mildews that are a real problem, especially on grapes through the summertime. So this is another sort of offering from the medical lectures. And I did some work last year with the cinnabar remedies and on grapes, and a vine that is growing in a very stressful situation, and for every year for the last 30 years has had powdery mildew. For the first time last year, it didn't have powdery mildew, and it had a good grape crop. The birds got most of it, but nevertheless, the grapes, at least got to form and be available for birds. So these are a couple of indications that are coming out of the medical lectures. And the Bidor remedy is generally suggested against headaches. And so a headache is considered to be an overly strong expansion process out of the belly pushing up into the head. And so we can just push it back downwards again. And I've done that with low potency 501 and other just silica D6, cell salt will do the same thing. But this Bidor remedy works really, really well on doing that. So anyway, this year I'm doing some trials with the Bidor and the cinnabar together. But anyway, these are all things that can be offered to biodynamics, through the medical lectures.
Glenn, would you mind discussing a little bit more how you apply that remedy, for example, on the grape that you turned around the fungal attacks on? My question would be, for example, are you applying that to the plant or are you applying it to the fungal attack?
You spray the plant.
And
It's a liquid.
And I mean, at what point in the year do you spray that in the spring and it takes care of it all season, or are you spraying it weekly, or how are you
At the,
doing it?
at the moment, it's once a month we spray it. Now, it's a friend of mine that's doing it. So I mentioned to them that they should start doing that. I haven't heard back whether they are or not, but I mentioned that they do. And last year they did it monthly, but I think for only 3 times, right at we were a bit late, so it was like November when we started, so they sprayed it monthly, November, December, January sort of thing. And it worked. So, at the moment, that's how we're doing it, just monthly. Because with homeopathics, you don't want to overdo it. It's actually a little is enough. And it's a case of how little can you get away with rather than how much should you use.
So you're balancing the energy of the plant and not being concerned about the fungus that's taken care of by the plant being well-rounded.
Yep, most definitely.
Okay.
Yep. The fungus or a pest is only an indication of something.
Okay.
Of an energetic imbalance. And if we deal with the energetic imbalance, then the problem will go away. And that's what I understand biodynamics is.
Yes.
And so it's all about what is the energetic problem, and powdery mildew is a summer problem. It comes in the spring, but it really takes off and loves a real hot, dry summer. So it's fitting into that, coming from above hot disease that Stein is talking about. And whereas this other one that Stein is talking about in the 6th lecture, that's rots. Too much water, too much moon, that's rotting problems. It's not actually dry disease. So I sort of wonder how much equisetum is the solution for powdery mildew, for example. I think there's a high probability it'll make things worse, just like 501 can make powdery mildew quite a lot worse. So that's the thing. It's all about changing the environment, and then the pest can't survive in that. Steiner makes that comment somewhere. I think it's more about bacteria in the soil and so on. In the 6th lecture, he makes this really interesting comment about insects, and he's talking about nematodes in the soil and how we need a certain astrality from above working into the soil, and if we can change that environment, then the bugs can't live there. Which, funnily enough, he then immediately goes on and starts talking about peppering, which is quite a different solution, because as we know, you're only getting rid of that particular pest with peppering. You're not actually changing the energetic environment, and a similar pest will come. So, we peppered sparrows and we got little goldfinches, and we peppered the little goldfinches and we got the little wax eyes, So it was like something else would always come in and fill that niche because we weren't sorting out the niche. Whereas with the products that I'm making using the homeopathic biodynamic preparations and these others, we're closing the niche. And so we're getting rid of 90% of the birds, not just one type of bird. We're getting rid of a whole bunch of them. And to me, that's what Steiner indicated in that passage about the nematodes, but he sort of didn't go into that any further. He went on to peppering, which of course is a very good thing for a farmer who's got a specific problem. But as I say, you're not solving the problem. You're not solving the energetic problem with peppering.
Okay.
So as I say, it's about the plant's experience of the environment, and if we can change that. Now, you can do it, of course, physically with water. If you water your plants, then that will strengthen that upward force from below, and that will push off the light and the warmth that's coming from above. So there is these physical things that we can do, get more humus in the soil, mulch more, make sure there's enough moisture in the soil, and the plant will therefore not get the disease. But of course, as you know, on large scale, it's a pretty moving feast, and you can't always have the perfect minerals in the soil and soil moisture and all that sort of thing. So this is where these other products help the plant to live in its environment. So, okay. Now, I can carry on here, and it's interesting talking about peppering and the sixth lecture, because this is of course where he talks about all this. And just to finish off that comment where I said, well, what is peppering then? And what he's talking about is really the moon having an influence on reproduction. And that what we're doing with peppering is that because we're using the skin of the animal, we are being able to cut off that reproductive moon process from the incarnating process. And so what we'd seen with thistles that we peppered was that in the second year after we peppered them, the thistle grew, but in the seed head, everything was there except the seed. So the flower came, and all that hairy stuff, the flowery, purple flowery stuff on the top of the seed head was there, but there were no seeds in the flower. And then in the following year, of course, there were way less thistles. So that showed us that it really is working on that moon process, but that's all it's doing, and that it is quite species related, and so it will work. I believe peppering works really well on the target species, but it's not solving the problem. Be it a mineral deficiency, some soil quality, like not good enough drainage, something like that. With clay soils, I'm a real believer in sand as a primary input into a clay soil. It so changes the whole dynamics of the way the soil works, and therefore how the soil biology can work, how the water is held, how the water flows. It's a huge input. And in the second lecture, Steiner makes quite a point of that. But as we said before, it seems to have slipped by the sort of general consciousness.
Yeah, I think we discussed this a little bit earlier, probably in the first part of this lecture series. But
yeah,
you were recommending river sand.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what is the if you're doing this like in a home raised bed garden that's very clayey, how much sand would you think you would incorporate in it, at least initially?
The last year because we have a heavy clay here, we're on a bit of a clay hill here, and I put on the equivalent of 180 tonnes per hectare. Of course, it was in a smaller area, but it was almost half to an inch deep layer of sand
Okay.
over the top of the soil, and I dug that through, and fairly roughly, but just flicked it through, and it did work much better. But now a year later, I'm feeling like I could do the same again without any trouble at all. And I did on where I put in beetroot, parsnips and carrots, the root crops. I did do the same again. In other parts of the vegetable garden, I haven't got around to doing that just because I'm a bit lazy. But yeah, you can do it. That wasn't too much. I think that's the point. It certainly wasn't too much, 180 tonne per hectare.
Okay, and again, you said like a half to 1 inch across the surface of the bed.
Yep, and you know it's not too much. You can't. I don't think you can do too much damage with sand into a clay soil. You'll know when it's right because it'll be friable. It'll be easy to work. You know, around here, about now, we're in late November. Everything's starting to go pretty much rock hard now. And you can't weed the soil, you can't dig it, you can't do anything, you know. But where I put the sand, we could weed all through the summer, you know. It was just that much more open that we could, you know, work with the soil.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. And in a vegetable garden, it's completely doable. You know, I appreciate on a large scale it's not, but, you know, sand's not expensive. If I had a 20-acre orchard on a clay soil, I'd get a big truck in and just spread the stuff. And the worms will work it into the soil, by the way. You don't have to dig it in on a big scale. The worms will take it in and start spreading it around.
Okay.
But, you know, I don't have large amounts of land, so I don't have to do it. But it's, you know, it's only the cost of trucking. Sand's not an expensive input. And it's there, it's a structural input, so it's not going to go away. You know, it'll get absorbed into the clay and so on, but it's not going to leach out or anything like that. You know, once it's there, it's there. So it's a good long-term solution.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, now I could say quickly about how are we going here. 49 minutes. So I can quickly have a look at this 8th lecture because it's really in the 8th lecture that we get this image in the green book, the green agriculture course. It's page 155. And it's there that we, for the first time, get this image of these 4 activities working within the physical systems. And we then have to go over to page 158, where he gives an image of the plant. And essentially, it's the same activity. He outlines how the australity is above, and of course where the etheric is around the leaves. And then where he's got the root, that's the sort of physical activity. And then he gives this whole area under the plant of what he talks about as ego potential. Now, of course, this is very similar to the forces that are being crystallized in the winter as the cosmic forces. And so that's the image that we have showing how these 4 activities are working into the plant. Now, what we've got in the 8th lecture is that he's talking more about animals and how we're going to feed animals. And he uses this basic connection of the root of the plant to the head of the animal and the fruit of the plant being related to the belly of the animal. and he gives quite a simple image here that we find reproduced a lot in the medical work, is that a lot of Steiner's remedies are based on this simple concept that if you want to get things into the head, then you're going to use the root of the plant. And if you want to stimulate the will processes or the digestive processes, then you're going to be using fruits as the remedy. And a good example of this is the chamomile plant, where if we want to stimulate the digestive processes of if we have any kind of poisoning activities, any over nitrogen activities, we can use the calcium and oxygen processes of the chamomile as chamomile flowers, the tea of the flowers, that will soothe the digestion. And if you've got a flatulence problem, it's really interesting to see the effect that the chamomile has on that. Now, if, however, we want to get that etheric stimulating activity of the chamomile and use it as a pain relief, then Steiner suggests that that we use the root of the plant. And so in Steiner medicine, they make I think it's actually a decoction of the root, and then they potentize that to about D3 and use that as a teething drops. That it really helps to alleviate the pain around teething.
Yeah.
And it does it not by taking the pain away, as it were, but by strengthening the etheric. And so by strengthening the etheric, it pushes off that astral body that's bringing the pain. And so this is the image that he's using here. But what really comes out of the 8th lecture is this whole discussion around cosmic nutrition and earthly nutrition. And he gives this really interesting interplay of those 4 activities that I talked about for fungal control. Pretty much the conversation that I had about the fungal control and how those 4 activities are working together, he has exactly the same story in the 8th lecture when we're feeding cattle. And he sort of starts off, it's a bit of a circular story, so it's a bit hard to know which bits first. But he starts with digestion, and we eat something, and in a sense 3 things happen. Is that in the process of our digestion, and especially in our stomachs, where we have hydrochloric acid in our stomachs, that when we eat something, that hydrochloric acid, in a sense, breaks down all of that substance, and it sort of cooks it, as it were, in that, and so there's this element of what he called ash out of that cooking process, which makes its way up into our brains. And this is this expansive process moving upwards into our heads, and that ash process gives us the substance of our brains. So the physical substance of our brains comes from that residue, as it were, from digestion. And there's forces that are released out of that digestive process, and these become available to the digestion, and we'll see what they do in a minute, and they're called earthly forces. And then we have what's left over, and so that's the excrement. That's what is manure, by the way. This is the cow manure that we're using, is this excrement that's left over. And of course, Now, what Steiner says is that the substance of our brain conditions the way that we're able to receive the cosmic forces that are just floating around in the universe. And so he gives the image of the brain a bit like a satellite dish, and that the condition of our satellite dish will therefore condition what we're able to receive. And of course, this gives an image of thinking, that thinking, especially, when we're just sitting around daydreaming, we're just watching the satellite dish. And it's in our back brains, as it were, that we're just getting these sort of images that are floating by us, and we're just watching those. But to bring it to consciousness, to bring them into clear thoughts, we have to have a good amount of phosphorus available so that it can bring it into our front brains, and we can then make a sort of rational assessment of these sort of random thoughts that are just running around. And so in the story that he's telling here, it's these our ability to receive these cosmic forces through our senses. So we've got these activities that are coming to our brain, and that's the cosmic forces, and that's what sets up our thinking and all that sort of stuff. But our nerve sense system, of course, is also wired into all of our senses. So our eyes, our ears, our smelling, our taste, our feeling of our skin, all of those senses are feeding some of these cosmic forces into our bodies and into our body as such. And this is where he's saying, just as the light and the warmth in the, in our environment is an active player in the plant growth, so these activities that come through our senses work all the way down into our bellies. And he says these are the activities that show up as our fingernails and our hair and our toenails. It's that silica process that's showing up there. But that process has to work in with those earthly forces that are left over from the digestion. And he's saying the ability for these two things to work together, that cosmic nutrition coming through our senses and the quality of the digestion that we have in our bellies, all work together, that then allow us to take action, take will, get the will forces going. And that this cosmic substance working with that earthly forces is what makes us fat. And he makes this comment that pigs are really just a great big bag of cosmic substance. And so we've got to fill them up. And so this is why he's sort of talking about the need for animals to get outside and to walk around and use their senses to smell the grass and to, really become active in their environment. And through this sort of interaction with the environment, they're getting all of this stimulation that will then make them fat. Now, this has made me wonder about what's obesity in this regard. And while, of course, it's sort of quite poor nutrition in a lot of ways, it's also saying that it's people who are getting a lot of input, but they can't process it. They can't sort of deal with it. They don't want to deal with it, or they can't deal with it. And of course, when we've got poor nutrition and we've got a lot of salt, so we've got a lot of chlorine in the system, that pushes us into our back brain, and it diminishes the phosphorus activity, so we can't think, we can't rationalize, we can't objectify anything, so we can't process stuff. And so, when we've got this very poor digestion and we're not getting a good ashing process, so we're not getting good brain substance, so we're not able to receive the cosmic forces and the cosmic substance well enough, and we can't, bring our consciousness to bear on all of the processes in our lives. We just accumulate these experiences, all those sensations and feelings and thoughts. We just accumulate them all, and in a sense, therefore become obese. So this is a very sort of interesting sort of thing that he talks about, and it starts to sort of give some credit to the potential for breatharians, these people who don't eat. they just live off the air and the light and the sort of senses that they receive. So as I say, this story is essentially the same as the one that we had in the fungal control. By balancing these four forces, we're able to create a healthy animal just as much as we create a healthy plant. So I see that we're up to about an hour now, and so I would say that's probably enough for us all to digest. And you know, I hope this series just acts as indications for people to look further and to investigate the medical lectures, and more than anything, see that biodynamics is really needs to be seen within this context of these four activities rather than just the two that is so common.
Okay. Glenn, why don't you give how to contact you on the web, or how to find out more about your work and your books and your
Okay.
and your products?
Okay. So a lot of my books are free on the internet. There's a lot of reading there that's free, and this is at my www.garudabd.org website, and more information on our products and things is actually at the bdmax.co.nz website. And I'm very happy to talk with people. You'll find my contact details at the websites. And, you know, at the moment, I don't feel overly swamped by people that I'm talking to. So I'm quite open to talk with people to gain a better understanding of all this if they want to email me.
Okay. Well, I'll endeavor to put these links in the show notes for this program also, which will be at bdnow.org. And likewise, anybody listening to this program can contact Glenn through the comments on the show notes on bdnow.org as well. And everybody should be thankful for how much of himself Glenn is giving to help us understand better what Steiner's indications were or are. And
yeah. Well, thank you, Alan, for the opportunity. And yeah, I hope people make good use of this too.
Yeah, I think a lot will come from it, but it may take some time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again so much, Glenn.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.